Welcome back everyone to the Hello World Guide. This is another episode of the Android game development series, and in this video we are going to learn about input in Android. So before we get started with actually handling input, we need to fix our event handling code a bit because there are a couple of problems with this. So the main one is that we do not actually need to call this. We are currently only calling the poll once one time, but we actually need to do it multiple times. So to do that, we are going to create a bool here which I'll just call done, and I will set it to false. Now we will execute a simple do while loop here, and we will do it while we are not done. So this loop will get the result, and as you can see, it's giving us some kind of warning, which is because it's an endless loop, but we are going to fix it in a second. So the result that we get from our a looper poll once function, we are actually going to do a bunch of different things depending on that. So currently we only check if it's greater than or equal to 0, which means we need to call the process function. But as you can see, this can return a bunch of different values depending on what happens. So we are going to handle each of those using a switch statement. So I'm just going to add switch here based on the result, and the first thing that we need to handle is the a looper underscore event. And as you can see, this we have got here, actually as you can see, there are not events, we need to say a looper poll. So we have got poll wake and poll timeout. So I'm going to go ahead and start with poll wake and then a looper poll timeout, and if any of these occur, then that means that we are done with our event. So we can just set it done to true, and then we can break. A timeout means that we reached the timeout without getting any events, and wake just means that the application was waked. We don't really care about that, so we are going to do the same thing as we did with timeout. And since we are passing 0 for the timeout, that means that the timeout expires immediately if there are no pending events. So this means that once we are done handling all of the events, we'll just go ahead and complete our loop here. So the next thing we are going to do is a looper poll error, and that just means that an error occurred. So we can just log something to the screen. So we can say log e, for example, to log an error, and we can say a looper underscore poll once returned an error, like that. And the other case is that if you go ahead and look at the documentation, you can see that we have got callback here. If a callback was invoked, we don't really care about that, so we are going to just do nothing if a callback was invoked, if a callback was invoked. And in the default case that none of these happened, this means the result is positive. So we are going to go ahead and actually just put this here. We don't need to check the result, but we do need to check the poll source. So if you've got the poll source, it's not null, then we are going to call the process function on it, and that's pretty much all we need to do. And this is going to be a much more proper event handling system, and with this we can handle all of our events efficiently. And we actually that's pretty much all we need to do. So now we've got that fixed, we can move on to actually getting the input. So the way we are going to get the input is in a structure which we are going to call Android input buffer. So we are going to call it input buffer, and we can get this function by using the Android app swap input buffers function. We are going to just pass this app here, and if you go ahead and look at the documentation of this, and it actually opened up the .c here, which is not where we want to go. If you go in here and you look at the Android swap input buffer, yeah, you can see that we have got the swap input buffer here, and this just takes a Android app, and then we need to use this in order to process the input event. So it's going to return us a pointer to an input buffer, and it's going to return null if there are no more events. And we are going to go ahead and check if our input buffer is a valid pointer, and if it is, then we can go ahead and start to actually use it. So I'm going to just run a for loop here. We are going to start at 0, and we can use the input buffer motion events count here, because we only care about the motion events or the touch events. So we are going to go over all of the motion events, and we are not going to do anything with any of the other events. So we are going to loop over all of the motion events, and then we are going to go ahead and get the motion event. So it's the game activity motion event, and we are going to get a pointer to that, and we can just get it, we can call it event, for example, or you can call it motion event, and we are going to set it to input buffer motion events I. So this will get us our motion event, and we are going to check if our motion events pointer count is greater than 0, and there can be multiple pointers, but we only care about the first one for now. Of course, in a proper application you might want to handle multiple pointer support, but we are going to just start with one for now. And if it's greater than 0, that means we have at least one pointer, and we are going to just deal with the first one, and we are not going to care about any of the other ones for now. Alright, so we are going to go ahead and do this, and then we can get the action. So we can say motion event action, and this is the actual action of the motion event, and we can use this to figure out what actually happened that triggered this event. And we care about when the user actually presses on the screen, which means that we are going to want to actually use the Android. Which means we want. So now we are going to get the motion event action, and this action encodes different information. We only care about what actually happened, which means what triggered this event. So was it a click, the user pressed the screen, or the user moved their finger on the screen, or the user lifted it. So we can go ahead and first of all we are going to bitwise AND it with a mask. So we are going to go ahead and motion event mask action mask, and this is going to give us the actual action. And as you can see, this is just defined to give the lowest byte of it, and we are going to do that, and this will give us a int value which I'm going to just call masked action. And once we get this, we are going to, depending on this action, we are going to do different things, but for now we are going to just check if it is equal to a motion underscore event underscore down action down. So if the down event occurred, which means the user just pressed the screen, then we are going to go ahead and actually do something. So as I said, we are only going to care about the first pointer. So for that we are going to go ahead and get the x and y coordinate of that pointer, and the way we'll do that is by using the game activity pointer axis underscore x and underscore x get x, and this function we are going to just pass a pointer to a pointer to a game pointer here. So we just need to pass a pointer here. So we are going to go ahead and get our motion events pointers, and we are going to just get the first one. And similarly we are going to do for the y-axis. We are going to use this to get our y value here. And now we actually need to pass this to our game somehow. So to do that, I'm going to go under game.h, and here I'm going to create a simple function which is we are going to just call touch event, and this is going to just take a glm vec2 position as an input. So we are going to go here, and we are going to go ahead and say game well, actually we need to move this part up here before we actually handle the input here. So we're going to move this here, and then we can go ahead and say something like game touch event, and we can give it our position. So we're going to just give x and y. We're going to construct a vector based on that. So now I'm going to go here, and we're going to create a definition for this touch event function. And to test something, what we are going to do is we're going to display our test texture at the given position. So for that, I'm just going to create a vec2 here, which I'm going to call test position. And then with this vec2 that we've got here, I'm going to go here, and we are going to not scale it. Actually we are going to just translate it, and we are going to translate it, and for the actual vector we are going to pass our test position and 0 on the z-axis. So, and we can just initialize it here so that it doesn't give us a warning. So we have got our test position here. By default it's 0, and we use that to choose where we want to draw our test texture. So whenever a touch event occurs, we are going to change this test position so that this test texture is drawn at wherever we actually click the screen. But this position that we get is in screen coordinates, and we want to convert it into our game coordinates. So the way we can do that is that, as you know, our render, if I open up render.cpp, we create a projection matrix here, and this projection matrix is for transforming a point or a position from our game's world space to the actual normalized device coordinates that the OpenGL uses. Now if we just inverse this projection matrix, that means that we can multiply the inverse projection matrix with the normalized device coordinates in order to get back our actual world space coordinates. So the first thing we need to do is we need to convert this position from screen coordinates to normalized device coordinates, and then we need to convert it from normalized device coordinates to world coordinates by multiplying it with the inverse of the projection matrix. So to do that, we want to actually access the size and of the screen as well as the projection matrix. So we are going to just create a couple of variables here. We are going to create an int width and a height, and then we are going to create a GLM metaphor called projection inside of our renderer so that it actually stays outside of this toFrame function. So we are not going to declare any locals here. Instead, we are going to use the actual class member variables. So now I'm going to open up render.h, and in here we are going to just create two functions. One is going to be, I'm going to just make it a glm ivec2. Ivec2 is just an integer vector which I'm going to call getSize, and this is going to return the width and the height as a vector of two integers. And then we are going to create another function here which is going to be get projection so that we can get the projection matrix, and this is going to return the projection matrix, and both of these functions should be probably be marked as const. So yeah, this is going to basically allow us to access the projection matrix and the size of the screen from our game. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the game.h class here, and now we want to convert our position from the screen coordinates to our actual normalized device coordinates so that we can multiply it with the inverse of the projection matrix. So the way screen coordinates work is pretty much the same as every other windowing API. So the top left corner is 0, 0, x-axis increases towards the right, and y-axis increases down. And this is actually not according to how OpenGL works. In OpenGL normalized device coordinates, the y-axis increases up, so we'll need to invert the y-axis. So first thing we are going to do is we are going to set our test position to the value of this position divided by, we are going to cast to a glm vec2, a float vec2, not an integer vec2, and we are going to get our render.size. So this will transform it from 0 to whatever the size of the screen is from, and it's going to transform it from that to a 0 to 1 range. So the position is now in a 0 to 1 range. Now that it's in a 0 to 1 range, we are going to invert its y-axis. So we are going to say the y is going to be just 1 minus y. It's going to just basically inverse it. And once we have inverted the y-axis, so now it's such that the y-axis increases upwards and the x-axis increases towards the right. And 1 is the maximum value for both the x and the y-axis. So now we can go ahead and multiply this test position by 2. This will change the range from 0 to 1 to 0 to 2. So now it ranges from 0 to 2, and then we can subtract 1 from it, and that means that now it will range from -1 to +1, and that is what the normalized device coordinates use. So now we can set our test position to the inverse. We can use glm inverse to calculate the inverse of a matrix, and then we can use render.getProjection, and that will give us the projection matrix. We'll inverse that, and then we'll multiply this with our test position, but we'll need to cast it to a glm vec4 first. So we're going to give it our test position, 0 as the z-axis and 1 as the final w coordinate, and this will convert our test position to the actual screen not the screen coordinates but the world coordinates, so that we can actually use it here. So if I go ahead and just run this, as you can see, now it has started, and if I press on the screen, you can see that actually nothing is happening here. That is because some of the motion events are being filtered and we are not actually getting all of them. So we can just do that by using our Android app set motion event filter, and we are going to give our app, and we are going to just pass null here so that we get all of our events and nothing is filtered. Now if I run it again, now you can see our app is starting, and wherever I press on the screen, you can see that the logo moves to that position, but actually there are some problems, it seems, and the reason these problems are occurring is because we are not clearing our input buffer, so it's containing some old values from the previous frames as well. So to do that, we can just go ahead and say Android app clear motion events, and we can just pass it our input buffer. And if I go ahead and run this again, now you can see that I can press on the screen and there are no problems, and wherever I press, the logo immediately moves to that position. So yeah guys, it's gonna be pretty much it for this video. It was just a brief introduction into like how to handle events and how to actually take input and touch input in an Android app. And of course there are a lot more complications than this. This is just like a basic implementation. There we currently don't handle actually moving with the pointer pressed down, so you can just click at one place and it will move immediately, and you can't slide provide it. So we can implement those things in the future perhaps. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next video, and share this video with other people as well. And bye.